The excavator's bucket crashed through my cedar wall, like a shark fin slicing through a kiddie pool. My fishing rod snapped in half, neat as a magician's trick gone wrong. I watched, half stunned, while on the dock. HOA President Lorna Petrescu stood there in her pastel sun visor and pressed slacks, holding a clipboard like a sword, sipping smugly from a thermos with her initials etched big as her ego. She actually shouted, "Community character restored," like she'd just banished evil from the land. And I'll tell you, the backhoe was beeping a funeral march while a heron stood on the bank, looking personally insulted. All I could say, real quiet, was, "Hope you pulled the right permits, Lorna." She smiled. You know that smile people use when they send soup back at a restaurant for being too wet? That's her. Anyway, I'm Wade Ellison, software consultant by day, obsessive angler by nature, collector of earplugs and solitude. I'd bought this little A-frame fishing cabin on Drimple Pond, tucked into Willow Bend shores, just a couple sleepy streets and a dead end outside Pine Hollow. The sort of lake where you wake up to the smell of pancakes and motor oil. I kept to myself. Fixed things. Fished a lot. Life was easy. Until Lorna arrived with her welcome packet, a strongly suggested color palette, and a laminated photo of what she called an aspirational mailbox. I told her that visor looked like a satellite dish. Honestly, I thought it was funny. She did not. She never forgot it either. Lorna started slow. A violation here, a violation there. Said my cabin was too rustic, my fishing decor too rogue, my wind chimes allegedly lured gulls to excessive conviviality. She measured my dock with a tape labeled HOA property and cited my canoe for unpermitted lake presence. Soon she was showing up before sunrise, snapping photos of my tackle box like she was CSI, Base Pro Edition. She documented the angle of my fishing nets, the space between my deck chairs, the fact that my welcome mat sat just a bit askew. She fined me for the name of my boat, Real Escape, claimed it was promoting anti-community sentiment. The kicker? My tackle box violated the approved container aesthetic, which, apparently, existed only in her private binder. She even snapped pictures of my lures through the window, then wrote me up for visible weaponry. I told her, they're for catching base, not assaulting neighbors. Lorna. She goes, intent doesn't matter, only perception. Yeah, that happened. Things got weirder the better I fished. Every time I posted a big catch on the neighborhood forum, Lorna would swoop in with HOA bylaws about wildlife harassment and aquatic resource monopolization. She actually tried to implement a catch reporting system. You'd need pre-approval for fishing times and mandatory photos of every released fish, all for equitable recreational distribution. Then came the rumors. Apparently, I was running a bait speakeasy out of my boathouse, dumping chum at midnight, and using my boat as a, well, let's just say I may have once called her visor a marital aid for satellites. My bad. Next thing I know, she's flooding the forum with warnings about dangerous anglers and outlaw Adirondack chairs. At HOA meetings, she started hinting that I was depleting fish stocks, endangering the nautical environment, that sort of thing. She even brought in her nephew, the supposed expert, with a marine biology degree from, I kid you not, an online university, to give a whole presentation about the dangers of unregulated fishing. The audience looked about as convinced as a cat at a dog show. One morning, I got a special compliance notice. My grandfathered cabin, built in the 70s, was now non-conforming blight. I had 10 days to demolish it and restore the shoreline to HOA-approved minimalism. I mailed back a copy of my deed, assessor's records, the 1982 variants, and a sticky note. You can't retroactively outlaw history. Lorna replied by scheduling restorative action. While I was at work, the HOA rolled up with a rented excavator, a flatbed, and 3 guys whose entire safety plan was orange vests. No city permit on the window, no posted notice. They cut the power, kicked the door, and started chewing up my cabin. A neighbor called me. I arrived just in time to see my wall mounts, my prized smallmouth base, get turned into sawdust. I asked Lorna for the permit. She waved a packet stapled together, which turned out to be the HOA newsletter with a cafe menu attached. She said, "We don't need city approval, it's private governance." Some guy in a neon beanie was sawing through my dock humming Sweet Caroline, as if that made it legal. That's when 2 ugly facts collided in my brain. First, Drimple Pond drains into a designated wetland under county, state, and federal protection. Second, nobody had told any of those people. So I started calling numbers. Words like unlawful demolition, trespass, destruction of improvements, shoreline disturbance, and Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction just fell out of my mouth, like lures out of a spilled tackle box. By sunset, a county code officer stood on the mud, staring at what was left of my A-frame. He asked, "Who authorized this?" Lorna piped up, "The board." The officer blinks. "The board of what?" The next morning, we had company: County Building and Safety, the State Department of Environmental Quality, a fish and wildlife ranger whose hat alone demanded respect, and an Army Corps of Engineers truck with a logo that says, basically, Final Boss of Water. Lorna tried to hand over her stapled newsletter, now with a dessert menu. Not impressed. Turns out, if you want to demolish a structure within 50 feet of a protected shoreline, you need a real demolition permit, sediment control plan, turbidity curtain, licensed contractor, and, this is key, the property owner's consent. I handed over my documents. The officials pulled out their clipboards, taped off the scene, and ordered the HOA to cease all activities. Activities suddenly sounded like a felony. Neighbors started coming out of the woodwork. People Lorna had fined for improper Adirondack angles or non-compliant porch lighting. Someone handed me a pile of emails showing Lorna coaching the board to act before he. The sentence just trails off. My attorney, he's allergic to drama, loves footnotes, filed a lawsuit for trespass, conversion, destruction of improvements, negligence per se, and got an injunction freezing HOA funds. Parallel track, the county cited the HOA for unpermitted demolition, the state for shoreline disturbance, fish and wildlife for habitat disruption. The heron was a witness, spiritually. The Corps of Engineers opened an investigation that made the vice president sit down on the curb like a kid waiting for the principal. At the emergency hearing, Lorna arrived in a blazer decorated with HOA pins like military medals. The judge, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, began going through the evidence. Photographs of my cabin mid-demolition, workers tossing my belongings in the dumpster, Lorna directing the chaos like a conductor. The judge read my property docs, original building permits, and the HOA's supposed authorization, meeting minutes where 4 board members voted to address the Ellison situation. Then he got to the demolition selfie Lorna had posted on the community page, making Willow Bend beautiful again. His eyebrows achieved liftoff. He asked, "Why did you not obtain the owner's consent?" Lorna, dead serious, goes, "Because he insulted me." The silence in the courtroom had mass. The judge leaned forward, asked her to repeat that, and she doubled down, produced a printout of my satellite dish comment. The judge looked at the paper, then at her, then back again, like he was hoping reality would blink. He issued a preliminary injunction, ordered immediate shoreline stabilization at HOA expense, and appointed a special master to oversee corrective reconstruction. My lawyer whispered, "That's Latin for you just bought a bigger hammer." The HOA's insurance found out what happened and hit them with a fun little clause called denial. The treasurer made a noise like a raccoon stuck in an air duct. 3 months later, my cabin rose from the mud with new footings, better insulation, and the same A-frame profile, because the special master demanded a like-kind rebuild, right down to the cedar grade and the spacing on the dock planks. The final bill? $187,000 for the cabin, $40,000 for environmental restoration. State fines, $75,000. County, $30,000. Corps mitigation fees, restoration of 2 acres of wetland, permanent monitoring, $90,000. Legal fees, $150,000 and change. All told, the HOA was in for over $500,000 in costs, fines, and fees. Decades of dues, gone in 3 months. Then came the kicker. A special assessment of $8,000 per household was proposed to cover the shortfall. The community's response was volcanic. People who'd been fined $50 for their planters were being asked to pay thousands for Lorna's vendetta. The emergency meeting to vote on the assessment was somewhere between a trial and an exorcism. Folks brought binders of every fine, letter, or threat they'd received. One woman had a binder thicker than Lorna's, labeled evidence of HOA harassment. Lorna resigned for personal reasons 5 minutes before the membership voted to remove her 4, public ones. The board had to sign a consent decree. No altering, demolishing, or even sneezing at structures without permits and owner consent. As part of the settlement, Lorna had to do 300 hours of community service, installing actual turbidity curtains for shoreline projects, supervised by the same fish and wildlife ranger, who now calls me Captain Due Process. A judge barred her from any community governance for 7 years and required her to attend a property law class taught by the county official, who keeps a printout of her vibes binder on his bulletin board. The day the judge announced the 7-year ban and 300 hours of community service, Lorna's face turned the color of a boiled lobster and she shrieked. But I was protecting property values. The court fell silent. For one slow, cinematic moment, you could hear the heron flapping in the distance, the sound of nails being hammered into the new dock, the whispers from neighbors who'd watched it all go down. But you know what? Some folks still say she was right. Rules are rules, after all. Others think I did the only thing you could do, standing up for the right to fish in peace on your own patch of water. Maybe you've dealt with someone like Lorna in your neighborhood, or maybe you are the Lorna where you live. I don't know. So let's hear it. Where's the line between order and overreach? Between community character and personal freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your HOA horror story, or just let me know which side of the lake you'd rather fish from. Because out here, you never really know whose rules you're breaking until someone brings the excavator.